Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Julie Petty, and I work with Meat and Livestock Australia as the Goat Industry Project Manager. Today's webinar is all around the goat meat market, and we've got some excellent guest speakers lined up today to give our listeners in a bit of an overview about what is happening in the marketplace at the present time. But before we get into that, I just wanted to run through a couple of quick housekeeping messages. So we are using WebEx as our webinar program today, and it does require that once you've clicked on the link to join the webinar that you need to separately connect your audio. So you can do that either using your phone or connect via your computer. And there should be instructions on how to do that in the registration email, the confirmation email you would have received when you registered. There should be some, and you should see on your screen, the blue phone symbol where you can click on that, and that will give you some options in terms of how you want to connect your audio, whether it be by phone or via computer. So to join by computer and have your audio selected that way, you can just click on those three dots under the blue phone and just click on the option that you want there. And we have everyone today is automatically muted just to help keep our background noise to a minimum for all of our listeners. So if you did have any questions for any of our guest speakers at any point in time today, you're very welcome to type those in at any point in time into the chat function, which you should see on your webinar screen. So effectively, it's just like sending an SMS or something like that, and you can type in your question there and select who you want it sent to, whether it's to the host, in which case it'll only come to myself, and I'll scroll through those and I can ask those questions of our guest speakers. Otherwise, you can send it to the whole audience, and then other participants can respond to your questions if they so wish. So in terms of, before we hop into the webinar and before I introduce our first guest speaker, I just thought I'd give you a really quick overview of MLA. So we work with red meat producers across Australia, investing in research, development and marketing. And we work with goat producers, sheep, grain-fed cattle and grass-fed cattle. I've already spoken a little bit about our role, but obviously we're investing in that research development as well as adoption and in the marketing space both domestically and internationally. It may come as a surprise, but you're not automatically a member of MLA. It is free, and you can very quickly sign up on the MLA website if you'd like to, and that's going to enable you to vote in things like our AGM and also receive all the different publications and so forth freely available to our members. In terms of the industry structure, so MLA is a research development and marketing provider, and we work with the peak industry councils such as Goat Industry Council of Australia, Cattle Council, Sheep Meat Council, to help determine research, development and marketing priorities for those industries. So that's our role really as a service provider to those red meat industries. So without further ado, Campbell, I cannot see our first guest. Oh no, Ben, you are there. How are you, Ben? Can you hear us? Ben, you might need to connect your audio or unmute yourself if you can hear me. Sorry, everyone. We've just got our first guest speaker. I'll introduce while we're waiting. So our first guest speaker today is Ben Thomas. Ben works with MLA in the NLRS department, so he's one of our market analysts. Ben's going to be giving us a bit of an overview today about what's happening from a high-level perspective within the goat meat market space, and be talking about some of the trends in terms of both pricing and demand that we're seeing in overseas markets that may be of interest to some of our viewers there. So I'll just reiterate while we're waiting for Ben to connect his audio. If you did have any questions at all for any speakers, please just use that chat function on your webinar screen, and I might just get everyone actually, if you could just show me that you're you can hear me and you're using the chat screen, if you could just pop a message back to me saying that, whether or not you can hear me, that would be fabulous. And I can see Ben is, here we go, Ben. Ben, can you hear us now? Ben? Thank you, Katie. I can hear, that's great that you can hear me. We're just waiting for Ben, I think, to connect his audio. I'm sorry, everyone. And I can't even ask for some jokes from the audience to keep us entertained, unfortunately, because you're all on mute. So I should mention, in terms of NLRS, that there are free reports that you can access either by signing up on the MLA website. So those reports give you information around things like the over-the-hooks prices, supply numbers that are coming through as well. Those are freely available, and you can get those either through the Market Information app on your smartphone. You can subscribe and get those emailed, directly through to your email address. Or all the past historical information is available on the MLA website, and so there's a search function there that you can go through and interrogate that information and get that sort of look at past market information.
Can you hear me now, Julie?
Yes, I can. Hello, Ben. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Julie.
Excellent.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Hopefully, can you see my screen? I've got your first slide up there, and we're ready to rock and roll when you are.
Yeah, I can see it, and thank you very much for that. And again, sorry for a little bit of a mix-up there. I accidentally dialed in with the attendee number rather than the host number, so apologies for that. So I'm just ready to go straight into it, Julie.
Yep. Please be my guest.
Yep. Cool. So thank you very much for taking the time to be a part of the webinar today. I'm sure Julie's already gone through that with you. What I'm going to talk about today is just some of the high-level trends that we see happening in the Australian goat industry at the moment, and the three key areas that I just want to touch on. Firstly, the whole supply side of the situation and some of the trends that we're seeing in the industry at the moment. And I'm going to have a little bit of a closer look at New South Wales, Victoria, and Queensland specifically, mainly because that's where the majority of the goats are processed each year. I'm also going to have a little bit of a look at the demand factors, and of course Australia exports about 95% of the goat meat that we produce each year, so a lot of the focus is going to be on the international markets. And then I'm just going to finish off by tying it in with how the markets are looking and how prices are looking for Australian goat producers. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, please, Julie. So firstly, just looking at goat slaughter across Australia on a rolling 12-month average, and as you can see, with the thick green line, which is the number of goats processed each month in Australia, since about the beginning of 2014, on average, every single month, we've been killing about 180,000 head per month. Now, that's been some pretty good and pretty progressive growth, especially when you consider all the way back to before 2002, when on average there were only around 60,000 head of goats processed per month. So it's been some fantastic growth in the industry, all on the back of the expansion of the flock/herd. And also on the back of the improved market signals too, enticing more and more producers to, or opportunistic harvesters to actually capitalise on the potential value that's available out there. When you have a look at the lines that are directly below that thick green one and have a look at it on a state-by-state basis, there wasn't really a clear or distinct or dominant goat-producing state up until about 2009. I mean, you could see, yes, there was some that were a little bit above others, but generally speaking, it was pretty well, fairly even Steven across all of the states before we hit 2009. And then you can see that Victoria and Queensland were the two states that really emerged as becoming the largest goat processing states. And between the two, you can see that Victoria and Queensland combined account for about 2/3 or if not 3/4 of the number of goats processed each month. In more recent times, and if you have a look at 2015 and 16, you'll see the red line, is headed down, and that's the number of goats processed in Queensland, and that's all on the back of the widespread drought conditions across that state. Whereas Victoria, and that's really a number that's bolstered by goats that have been transported from Western New South Wales down into Victoria. That's really inflated that number and the numbers that are processed down in that part of the country. But generally speaking, as you can see, there's been a fairly long-term for Australia rise in the number of goats processed each month. And then when you have a look at it on a state-by-state basis, it's really Victoria and Queensland that is the dominant two parts of the country. So off to the next slide, please, Julie. I just wanted to get a bit of a feel for what to expect for the next couple of years, and there always is a bit of a tricky one to try and predict with goats because there's not really all that much information available on the size of the flock. But if we have a bit of a look at history to see what some of the trends that have occurred after similar events to what we're currently going through, it gives us a bit of an indication of what we may expect. So what I've done here is annualised goat slaughter for New South Wales and Victoria, and the reason I've combined the two states is because a lot of New South Wales goats get processed down in Victoria. And just and coloured each year blue and red, depending on the rainfall in the key goat producing regions. So anything that's blue is basically an average or above average rainfall year, and anything that's red was a below average rainfall year. And from it, most of the time you can see that once we've had a string of blue years together or a string of good years, a string of wet years, we'll see a fairly significant increase in the number of goats processed. In fact, that increase can be anywhere from 7 to 40% year-on-year increase after a couple of blue years or a couple of average to above average years, followed by some drought years. So but then after that, after you've had a couple of red years together or a couple of drought years together, you'll often see the number of goats processed either flatline or stabilise. It's very, very rare that after a couple of dry years you'll see that number increase. So what to expect for 2016? Well, it's been a pretty wet year so far, and the latest data is for January to August. It's highly unlikely that in New South Wales / Victoria combined, the number processed will get up to the same level as what it was last year. And even thinking about 2017, again, because of that string of dry years, and on the back of what's going to be a pretty wet year next year, it is unlikely, or we aren't expecting, between the two regions, the number of goats to be processed to be above 1 million head. That's in New South Wales and Victoria. If you go to the next slide, please, Julie. And it's a very similar pattern in Queensland, with generally speaking the wetter years, or at least the average years, followed by dry years. You'll see anywhere from actually a 12 to 40% increase in slaughter. Again, looking at more, and that's a fairly standard pattern that has happened over the past almost 20 years now. When we have a look at the more recent times, you can see that the number processed in Queensland, it really is lagging behind. And it's highly unlikely that it'll even get close to 700,000 head this year, which is the equivalent of what it did in 2015. So, and what to expect in 2017, well, going off just how sluggish the slaughter numbers are this year, it's likely that 2017 will at best be somewhere around that 700,000 head mark, something similar to what 2015 was. And again, that's all just following that fairly typical and standard pattern of, after you get a couple of dry years, you'll see the number of goats processed in the state stabilise or even come back a little bit before once having another string of dry weather, which is more than likely going to happen, you'll probably see anywhere from a 12 to 40% year-on-year increase. Moving on to the next slide, please, Julie. Back one. So that basically summarises, where we see things in terms of the whole supply side of the situation. We've basically, on average for the past 2 years now, on a monthly basis, been processing 180,000 head of goats per month. Expectations are that because this is probably going to be, if you like, a bit of a rebuild year, and provided the weather conditions are good next year as well, it will be the same. It'll probably be that on average 180,000 head per month will actually start to trend a little bit lower, but it's unlikely to go back down to anything what it was like before 2012 when we were only killing about 150,000 head of goats per month or less. So somewhat of a decline, but not a dramatic fall. When we have a look at the demand side of the equation, again, Australia exports about 95% of the goat meat that we produce each year. And I really like to look at this chart because it shows that not only our key export destination, which is the US, the green one down the bottom, not only has there been growth to that market, but we've also been able to expand the number of other markets that we've been exporting to. So in other words, we don't have the same reliance on just one market like what we did, say, for example, in 2007 or 2008 when about 2/3 of the goats were going to the one market. It's come back down to now being more like 50-50. And there's a fairly wide spread in the range of markets that we do export to. Of course, again, America being the largest market, but there's a fairly good sprinkling throughout Asia with the likes of Taiwan, Japan, Korea, and in the other section, China makes up a fair contingent of that. We've also got sort of two other key regions that are primary goat meat export destinations, one being the Caribbean, with Jamaica being one of the major customers in that region, and then also a bit of a growing area has been the Middle East. So, just in summarising that, it's great to see that as our goat meat production has been increasing, if you have a look at the general pattern of that slide and compare it to the increasing number of goats processed, you can see it is all finding a home, and again, most of it is to the export market. But it's great to see that we're seeing a bit more of a diverse spread in where the product is exported, and all at the same time as maintaining that big supply base with America as our key and primary, export destination. So that's a great thing for the industry. Next slide, please, Julie. One of the big positives for Australia, especially since 2013, is the Aussie dollar has really weakened, and especially compared to where it was for the period 2011 to 2013. In fact, for that 2.5-year period, the Aussie dollar averaged above parity for the entire time. And so when you've got 95% of your production exported, prices the competitiveness of our product, of our goat meat, is very dependent on the strength of the dollar, the relative strength of the dollar. So from the middle of 2013 through to virtually where we are right now, having generally declined from those highs or that 2.5-year period above parity, that's again just another really positive factor for the Australian goat meat industry. 2016, I think the dollar has probably gone against many analysts' expectations in that it has strengthened, and it is now sitting at about 76 US cents. Forecasts for 2017 are, in fact, for it to come off slightly. So it's currently at 76 cents. The most recent forecast I read, which is about 2 weeks ago, were for the Aussie dollar to average 74 US cents next year. So, I mean, the lower it is, the better, the more competitive we are. But and so obviously down to 74 is a good thing. Obviously lower than that would be great and better. But the real positive is that there's no forecasts or expectations for that general increase that we've seen this year to continue, and for the Aussie dollar to get back above 80 cents. So again, another pretty big positive for the Aussie goat meat industry. So the next slide, please, Julie. Moving away from the processed animals and onto the live goat exports, and there's really two lines here that I'd like to discuss with you. And firstly, the green one, if you just concentrate on that, and the left-hand side is the axis for it. Going back for 2 or 3 decades now, you can see live goat exports have been an important part of the Australian goat industry. However, not nearly as significant as what processing is. So, again, this is on a rolling 12-month average. And if you have a look at the more recent times, say, for example, 2012 to where we are now, on average, on a monthly basis, Australia live exports anywhere from 3,000 to 8,000 head. Sorry, anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 head of goat per month. head of goats per month. Now, while that is an important part, it's still not nearly as significant, if you like, as the 180,000 head of goat that are processed each month. So, so it is an important factor, but by the same token, not quite nearly as significant as what the processing sector is. Generally speaking, I know you can see there's some extreme volatility there, but the general trend has been for a rise in live goat exports. And interestingly enough, the key market, Malaysia, if you have a look at 2015, 2016, there has been that little bit of a decline down to averaging only 6,000 head of goat per month being exported right now. They've actually been substituting for mutton just because of how difficult it is to get the goat and at the price that it is at the moment. Looking at the red line and the value of our monthly goat exports, you can see the last couple of months, or for virtually the duration of 2016, on average our goat exports, live goat exports, have averaged around 800,000 head per month. So again, a fairly significant and great news story for the industry when you think about the value that is available to come through the supply chain if you've got just another customer in the market looking to buy our goats through the live avenue, thinking about it from a producer's point of view. So, thinking forward about 2017, 2018, Australian live goat exports are likely to be subdued or constrained by the bit of a rebuild that's likely to happen, especially throughout 2017, if the good southern wet season that we've just had is replicated in some parts of northern Australia as well. So just moving on to the next slide, Julie, and I think this is my last slide. So bundling all of that up and just having a look at at prices. So on the one hand, we've seen a general increase in the number of goats that are available on the market. In 2016 and 2017, we're expecting that to stabilise. The demand's been pretty good, especially when we have a look at the diversifying export portfolio that it's going to. Live export demand, has continued to very, very generally increase. And so when we have a look at prices or indicative prices indexed back to 2004, you can see all the way up to about 2009, prices stayed fairly steady. They moved around a little bit, but not really all that much. And just to indicate, just to highlight how influential the Australian dollar is on prices, especially when 95% of the production is exported, take a look at the period 2011 to 2013. That's when the Aussie dollar was above parity with the US. And you can see that goat prices, after increasing throughout 2010 with that Aussie dollar just being so strong, it was a large part of the reason behind the Australian goat prices declining down to virtually 10-year lows at the beginning of 2013. But from then on, even though supplies didn't really tighten up that much, we saw a couple of record years of goat slaughter, but the Aussie dollar continually or progressively weakening has had a very, very positive impact on the Australian goat market. And as you can see now, where we sit today, goat prices are about 2.5 times where they were, only back in 2013. So again, just goes to show how influential a weaker currency is on the Australian goat industry, and it's just a very positive sign when we start thinking about the destination for our goat and that it's a diversifying export portfolio, and everything that we're producing is finding its way to a market. So that's it from me, Julie. Thank you very much for that, and I'll be on the line and looking forward to hearing what Campbell has to say, and I think Rick after that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that overview, Ben. That was excellent. And we do have quite a few questions that have come through on the line too. And I might just take this opportunity to remind everyone that if you have any questions for any of our guest speakers today, to just pop those into the chat box. Those will come through, depending whether you select, who you want those sent to. That'll come through to me or to everyone. So our other two guest speakers today are Campbell McPhee from Western Exporters in Charleville, so goat processors based out of Charleville in Queensland. And we've also got, I believe, Rick Gates, the President of the Goat Industry Council of Australia, online as well. Rick, have I got you there?
Yes, good afternoon, Julie. Thank you.
Hello.
Apologies for being late.
That's okay. I wasn't going to tell anyone. Our first question today, and I might open this up to both Campbell and Ben if that's okay. Do we have any more detail just around the Middle East market growth, destinations and cuts, that type of thing?
Do you want to go with that one, Campbell? Or
Well, Ben, we haven't seen anything to the Middle East and haven't done anything to the Middle East for probably over 10 years, so it's probably best for you.
yeah, I'll have to have it. Just bear with me for a minute if you don't mind. And can I come back to that one in a second, Julie?
Yeah, absolutely. No problem at
Yeah,
all.
for us, the Middle East isn't really a skin-on market, so we haven't had any real focus there, and most of the supply was coming from Africa at a cheaper price, so Australia wasn't getting much of a look in for us.
No worries. We've got a question that's come through regarding what the impact or interaction is between the live export market and the meat market. And I might open that question up to you, Rick, if that's okay, if you've got any commentary there about how one's affecting the other in terms of price trends and availability. I mean, Ben did touch on that a little bit in terms of the tightening of supply.
Yes, thanks, Julie. The skin, or like the meat market, with its strength at the moment is definitely making it difficult for the live export trade, and I think a lot of the slowing, as Ben said, a lot of the slowing of the supply is not only lack of supply, but the fact that the meat market is its strength is starting to make it hard work for the exporters. But in saying that, I mean, there's pretty special times when the meat market is really as strong as I've ever seen it, and as strong as it's ever been. In saying that, in times gone by, when the meat market has been weaker, the live export has been a good backup for producers to try and firm the market up.
Okay, thanks very much, Rick. We've got a question that's come through in terms of availability and indicative sort of cost of smaller animals if anyone's looking to do some restocking or wants to start a semi-managed herd at their place. Rick and Campbell, I guess I might open that question to yourselves. Like, what's the availability of young sort of underweight animals at the present time if people are looking to do some herd setup, and how might they go about doing that, or who to get in touch with?
Anyone who approaches Western meat exporters regarding chasing smaller goats for restocking, we usually put them in touch with a registered depot either here or in New South Wales. So they usually receive a bulk of goat before they will draft the smaller ones off and find a new home for them after ear tag. So I think there's a list on the Geico website. Is that right, Rick?
Of the registered depots are listed on the website. That's correct, Campbell.
Yes.
Okay. And to add to that, Julie, the time in times gone by, years gone by, when there was more, the supply was more plentiful, like people or producers could pick and choose when they wished to buy those undersized goats. But I think the trend now will be that if you want that type of goat that are under 22 or 25 kilo live weight, that you may have to actually take them in January, February, March, April, in that summer period, because that was the last big numbers of those size goats was earlier in the year.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ben, are you ready to come back to that question about the Middle East, or did you want me to hold that over a bit longer?
Yeah, no, that's okay. So for the year to date, there's been actually nothing to the Middle East, but from 2012 through 2014, it was mostly carcass trade to Egypt, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, and they're the main ones. There's a little bit to Saudi, a little bit to the UAE, but yeah, mostly carcasses to those four countries.
Okay, cool. No worries.
Ben, would you have a number of tonnage that was sent to the Middle East?
Yep. So Middle East in 150. That's it. 150 tons in 2012.
So to speak.
Yeah. So it's pretty small. Yeah.
No worries. Oh, thanks very much, Ben. Well, we might move on now to our next guest speaker. So as I mentioned, Campbell McPhee is here with us on the webinar today from Western Meat Exporters based out of Charleville. Campbell, Western Meat Exporters is one of the largest goat processing plants in Australia, so I guess you're very well placed to speak on this topic. How I might throw the floor over to you, and we'll just float through your slides as you're speaking.
Okay, thanks, Julie, for all that, and welcome all the listeners. My presentation is a little bit different than Ben's. It's more of a slideshow with a rolling shot, because I knew Ben would have a lot of graphs to view, so I just thought we'd mix it up a bit, and you can see some of the images and what we actually do here at Western Meat Exporters. My role in the industry is varied. I sit on the National Policy Group for the Australian Meat Industry Council for sheep, lamb and goats, and also the Queensland AMIC rep for sheep, lamb and goats. I'm also an associate member for the Australian Goat Industry Council. But my main role here is the Managing Director of Western Meat Exporters. Western Meat Exporters is located in southwestern Queensland in the Murway Shire in the township of Charleville, which has about 4,000 people in its population. It was a purpose-built abattoir built back in 1996, so it's running on 20 years this year. It sources goats from as far north as Muddaborough, as far south as Cobar, and out towards Broken Hill. We can process over 3,300 per day if the goats suit and if the availability suits. We employ about 170 people, and we also have our own transport company here. We have access to a US licence, EU licence, domestic, as well as other markets such as China and other parts of Southeast Asia. Because we're the only solely goat meat processor in Australia, we have learnt a number of ways to value add our meat products in diversifying as much as possible. We've tried many different products and procedures over the years to try to secure new markets that will be able to keep the plant viable into the future. Currently, our staple products include whole carcass, box six-way or assorted cut, burnt or what is also known as brown six-way cut. The whole goat, which is processed skin on or skin off. We prefer to do the majority of the goat skin on, as this gives us access to outside markets outside the reach of skin off. All of our skin on meat can be cubed, and as well as all of our brown carcasses can also be cubed. They're packed into 1 kilo bags for the US market. We also collect most offal as the market allows us to, such as heart, tripe, testes, liver, to name a few. All these products are frozen for 48 hours at around about minus 26. Then they're tested again before loading into a shipping container. The vast majority of our box meat goes to USA, with a lesser amount going to markets such as Canada, Caribbean and the EU. Whole carcass is mainly an Asian focus, to be sent out skin on into the skin on markets such as southern China, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Korea, Japan, Taiwan. The majority of the product is shipped in 40-foot containers, set on about minus 21. A carcass container will hold around about 20 tonne, when a carton meat container, box meat, will hold about 23 tonne, and then the local road restrictions pull us up on weights of going any heavier. Two 40-foot containers generally leave the Charleville plant each morning, as a rule, while 2 empty containers arrive the same day for loading. Western Meat Exporters is lucky to have its own transport company on site, which also takes care of our shipping our containers to Brisbane, as well as moving livestock onto the plant. The livestock generally arrives the afternoon before processing. They are counted and placed in the pens, and if needed, they are drafted into size for ease of dehairing. They continue to remain in their owner NVD mobs the whole way through until they hit the carcass scales. Each goat is inspected before slaughtering by an on-plant vet. This is done early in the morning before production, around 5 o'clock. Each goat will pass through a narrow gateway so it remains in a single file. The vet is looking for a number of issues such as fevered or broken leg, preg toxicity, lame goats, dog bites, staggers, any obvious disease outbreaks, as well as any signs of animal welfare issues. The vet will also clear the mob after inspection with the MVD. He'll inspect the MVD to make sure it refers to the right goats and that the MVD's been filled out correctly. It's always been an issue that once an MVD isn't filled out correctly with the wrong information, that this mob's going to be held up and the owners are going to be contacted for a correction. A Department of Agriculture anti-mortem tag is placed at the front of the start of each mob to inform the other government inspectors down the line that the next owner of this mob has been cleared for slaughter. By the time the first goat reaches the next Department of Agriculture inspector, it has been beheaded, dehaired and all offal removed. There are 4 inspectors at this point. 2 of them will be checking carcasses. The other 2 will be checking offal that correlate with the carcass. As well as looking for any problems with the offal that may in turn infect the carcass, the Department of Agriculture inspectors will view and fill the carcasses for bruising, cheesy glands, swollen glands, emaciation, fever, gangrene, contamination, jaundice, cancer, arthritis, septicemia, to name a few. After being cleared by the inspectors, they then will make their way to the scales and be graded depending on which markets are available. I sent a little video through to Julie. It was a video that we did in relation with Samex, and it was done for a Chinese market. And hopefully Julie can play that for you now and just give you a bit of an idea what the plant looks like internally and what the skin-on goats look like.
No worries, Campbell. That's picking up on everything.
Yep. We might get some audio too, do we? If you don't get any audio, I'll be the audio. Can you hear any audio, Julie?
Campbell, did you want to keep talking over the top of it, or?
Yeah, I'll talk over it. So these are some goats that are actually farmed in Charleville underneath irrigation. They're actually weaner goats that were sent out and sold on. And they came out and did a film so they could promote the goat in the Chinese market. Some goats have been unloaded. They get into the pens with the loosened hay and water under shade. And then they move from there to be upstairs to be inspected by the vet for a narrow gateway. It's moving awfully quickly, really. Goats on the floor, the inspectors inspecting carcasses. As you can see, but we'll slow it down a bit. Yeah, so there's another inspector inspecting offal through the trays. Goats moving through the chain. They move through around about 7 a minute. So it gives us opportunity to do about 3,000 per day. All the goats are done in a halal system. There's some US-type skin-on goats. Also, there's some goats there with a Chinese tag on them. All goats with Chinese have got double tags. There's some bagging. There's some goats going into the freezer in a whole polystock carcass bag. So they're generally for the Asian market, where the US market is mainly box meat, as we can see we're doing here, with some brown carcasses. Strapped and weighed and tagged. I'm not sure if your video is skipping like mine, but that's all fine. The organic status for the plant. And that's the loading of a 40-foot container and done to the roof. We can only get about 20 tonne in there at maximum anyway. And the government's still been placed on and more carcasses in the freezer, making their way. That's about it, Julie?
No worries. Thanks, Campbell.
No worries. Thanks, Julie. Yeah, hopefully that came out a bit better for everyone than what I was seeing.
I hope so.
And just going back on referring back to what Ben was saying regarding our markets and our access and where we see the industry going from here, we're extremely confident in what we're doing here and extremely confident going forward. We have had supply issues this year during the wet, and sometimes these wets are a blessing for the industry in disguise. With the US, we saw it 4, 5, 6 years ago when all of a sudden we had a lot more increase of markets throughout Southeast Asia, and the US all of a sudden had competition. So instead of us always being determined by the Americans what price we could pay, we had other accesses to markets that we could attract, and these markets have certainly grown over the years. So Ben was right when he mentions that we can look forward to hopefully a fruitful future for the goat meat industry. It's probably one of the main red meat out of the beef, the lamb, the sheep. The goat is always pretty much sold before it's walked onto the floor. So it's an easy meat to market, an easy meat to move when the situation is right. And I think the more people who are interested in going into goat meat into the future to secure our supplies is probably where the industry sits now. I think a lot of the hard work's been done as far as exploring all our markets and our potential markets, and there's more to come on board, such as India and the Middle East, and with Britain getting separated, we can export back to the UK. But the question will be, can the agriculture sector keep up with the demands of the industry? So we look forward to seeing how it all plays out. And that's me. Thanks, Jill.
Thanks very much, Campbell. That was excellent.
Yeah.
We've had heaps of questions come through, and I'll just...
hopefully they're all for Ben.
Sadly, no. So I'll just remind everyone, look, if you've got any questions, just pop those into the chat box. Those will come through to myself, and then I can ask our guest speakers. Campbell, what sort of minimum live weights are you taking there at the plant or asking for?
Yeah, the minimum live weights we generally do as a rule of thumb here is that when they go over the scales at 10 kilos. At this, we've always maintained a belief that we didn't want to be processing our smaller stock until they had the opportunity to have that maiden kid, so at least the flock would have its natural fall and natural replacement. But I know we have an increasing pressure from our suppliers because they're getting offered elsewhere to process goats, down to 8, down to 7 kilos. But yeah, we have been lucky to be able to tend away from that.
No worries, thank you. What sort of impact, if any, are you seeing in terms of improved genetics or more influence coming through, or semi-managed herds coming through into the plant?
You can certainly see that carcasses that comes onto the rail. You can see that the actual yield is going to be quite high, and the muscle density is going to make the scale going to increase the weight, and obviously the paycheck for that grazier. We don't see a lot of it. There's been a gradual incline, but we still get very good results out of the rangeland goats at this stage. At this stage, we're on the floor, the goats are averaging way above usual weights coming off this terrific winter we've all been through. We're actually having trouble sourcing a lot of our US goats are required to be below 16 kilos and above 10, and there's actually been a bit of an issue at the moment trying to find goats inside that smaller bracket. The goats are just yielding and weighing incredibly at the moment, and but as for people who are interested in value adding to their goats, it's a terrific idea. As long as I believe people just got to be careful about the value. One of the beauties of goats in the past has always been its low cost of production. So it does, if people go out and source expensive bulls or Kalahari Reds, well, as long as they can factor that into the cost of production, and I think at the moment it will pay its way. But yeah, long as they see the returns, and it's good to see people willing to invest.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Campbell. And look, I should say, if anyone is interested in, I suppose, looking more at those numbers and crunching those numbers, we do have some case studies and so forth up on the MLA website looking at comparisons, economic comparisons, that type of thing. And there is the cost of production calculator on the MLA website, which you can pump your data into and in 15 minutes work out your cost of production for sheep, cattle and goats. Campbell, what sort of percentage, I suppose, are you seeing come through with supply from sort of semi-managed herds versus that traditional harvested system, and has that changed much over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it certainly has changed. I believe probably when I first started here, we would have been 98% wild harvest. When now I would believe we're probably down to processing 85% wild harvest. So there's a lot more people that we can make a call to see what mobs or when they have them available, when they think that they'll be due again this year. because they are semi-managing behind wire. You see the mobs which arrive, the amount of older billies which are always on board, and the older nannies, and you'll notice the younger nannies are being kept aside. We're getting a lot better management as far as people who may have in past loaded pregnant stock. So I think people can see pregnant stock as for the value that it is, rather than sending it to slaughter. So we're definitely seeing the tide turning slowly away from the wild harvest as what the industry needs to secure its future.
Excellent, thank you. Just a question regarding the halal process. Are you able to just briefly elaborate on what that involves, and are all Australian processors halal processing?
All Australian processors who can export are halal processing. Some of the domestic wouldn't be. Talking about the halal process in itself, when it comes to the actual slaughter process, it's exactly the way that we would slaughter an animal with the same animal welfare standards, which is the highest in the world. Because they've done it here in Australia, they have to be stunned. They have to have no senses about them when they go into the actual slaughter itself. The only real difference there is where the man who's doing the final cut would be a Muslim. And in this plant, it's quite simple. We only run one species, so we don't have to have the concerns of any cross-contamination from other species of animals. We have a very good relationship with our Islamic Council. We always have, because we don't actually export to many Muslim markets, but if the end user requires a certificate, it gives us the option to give them the access to the halal meat. But as for the change or differential in the slaughtering process, exactly the same if we were doing it for a non-halal market. It's just we have Muslims in certain positions that just give them the guarantee that there has been no cross-contamination, and there's been a Muslim in each position that they're required to do the slaughter to make sure it's done in their beliefs.
No worries. Thank you, Campbell. One final question, and it's just in relation to the disease incidents, I guess. You did mention briefly some of the different conditions that you might see with the goats coming through. Is there much, would the rangeland goat, with its, I suppose, background being fairly minimal management,
yes,
have a lower incidence of those types of things than, say, sheep, for example?
Yes. Goats are very clean and organic, and they tick a lot of boxes. But when the goat industry was formed and the Department of Agriculture had to come up with certain standards, well, the goat industry being so small, it was just as easy for them to be in the Department of Agriculture. They just cut and paste all the information from what was required for sheep and put sheep and goats in the same box. So all of our inspection services are done to the same standard as sheep are. So that's why it's so intense, because sheep are heavily managed and their accesses to certain chemicals are a lot higher than goats. There has been a little bit of headway done in this area. We've asked for the department to come up, hopefully they can come up with their own procedures which are managed wholly and solely for goats. This may bring down some of our inspection costs and some of the hoops that we have to jump through when we're dealing with such a magnificent animal that only has minimal rejections and contaminations.
No worries, thank you. Rick and Campbell, I might ask if there's any sort of final commentary. Campbell, firstly, that you'd like to make, like key messages that you'd like some of the current producers or potential producers who are listening in, any key messages that you'd like them to take away from today's webinar?
Well, I guess being one who receives stock directly from growers, the NVD and the importance of it and how it keeps our goats and our traceability. Our traceability for our customers at the other end is paramount, and in keeping our market access. So people refer to the NVD I often look at them and they're half filled out and missing, and the vet comes running in here and saying, who's this and why haven't they filled out their paperwork properly? But then, you see people who fill out the books, the MVDs for the cattle, and they will spend half an hour making sure they dot every I and T because they know that there could be an issue if they don't put their postcode on there or they don't tick the right box, and the amount of money that they're dealing with is very important. Well, the goat MVD deserves the same respect. It can cause us all sorts of issues here as far as having to hold animals up for a kill, having to contact the farmer, and then if we do a monthly audit, or we have another country want to do an audit on it, say the Americans came here and they want to look for our traceability systems, and they see that someone's written out an MVD saying one billy goat with no other information other than his phone number. And we've got to justify why we do this, but if we want to remain with exemptions with our rangeland goats with ear tags and have that mob-based traceability, well, the MVD's got to be kept up with respect.
No worries. Thank you, Campbell. Rick, is there any sort of key messages or anything you'd like to add to that at all?
Campbell, on that traceability, I mean, it's the single biggest issue for the industry to deal with it, and I mean, and as Campbell said, it's like the form is reasonably, like the NVD itself is reasonably straightforward. It's just a matter of taking the time and treating it with the respect it deserves. A B double of with a B double of goats, returning around $90,000 to $100,000. I mean, it must be worth spending an extra few minutes on the documentation for that load. But apart from that, I just encourage anybody and everybody and welcome phone calls to my private number, which is not all that private because it's on the biker website. But to our phone number to discuss for anybody that's contemplating moving into goats to ring up and discuss some of the finer points. But I really do encourage people to look at it because it's a wonderful industry, and as Campbell and Ben have said, it's looking good.
No worries. Thank you very much, Rick. Ben, is there any sort of final closing comments that you'd like to add to the discussion at all?
Just reiterating what Campbell and Rick each said, that it's the outlook for the industry does look pretty damn bright, especially when we compare it to some of the other species where there are a few storm clouds or headwinds on the horizon. And from an MLA market information point of view, if anyone has any queries or any comments or any questions or would like to know anything more about the whole production side and just where Australia is sitting in terms of year ago levels and what the forecasts are, and also in terms of where indicative market prices are, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me either. That's quite easy to do by emailing the market information at meatandlivestocaustralia.com.au or marketinfo@mla.com.au. So, and thanks again for your time.
Yes, thank you so much, Ben. That's excellent. I'll just pop that website up there for people. That's the email address if you wanted to subscribe to any of the free market reports. Look, we don't have any further questions coming through, so I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Ben, Campbell and Rick very much for your time today in sharing your insights on the goat market with our audience, and thank you so much to everyone who's actually dialed in as well. Look, there is a whole bunch of information available to potential producers or existing producers that's for the most part freely available for you to access. So what I'll do following the webinar, and once we've got the webinar uploaded to the MLA website, I'll circulate some of the resources and so forth to everyone who's subscribed to watch the video, and then you'll have that at your fingertips. I'd also highly recommend, we had an excellent story that went to air on Sunday's Landline program, just talking about some of the research and development that the industry is doing at the moment, and interviewing some of the producers who are involved in that. So that was a really great story, and might just help give some of the audience a bit more insight into the industry. And what I'll do when I circulate the follow-up information following the webinar, I'll include some contact information for Rick. All that's available on the Goat Industry Council of Australia website. Rick's contact information, as well as the representatives for each of the different states as well, if you wanted to talk to someone who's a bit more local to yourself. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone, again for your time. We might wrap the webinar up at this point in time, but have a fantastic week, and we really hope to see you around the traps and get involved in the goat industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Julie.